Of Human Bondage, or The Pursuit of Freedom. Of Human Bondage is a 1915 novel written by William Somerset Maugham. Maugham was born in Paris in 1847 inside a British embassy. Having lost both his parents, he was sent back to England to live with his uncle Harry MacDonald Maugham, a vicar in Kent. These two events had been a trauma for William Somerset Maugham, who was subjected to his uncle's coldness and prudery. He attended King's School in Canterbury, but he was vexed by his classmates because of the way he spoke and his height. It's his thought that the school years were the time when he started stammering. After completing his studies in England, he went to Germany to study languages at the University of Heidelberg. Here he discovers the works of Goethe, Ibsen and Schopenhauer. In Germany, he became firmly convinced of not following the religious path, and in 1892 he enrolled at the medical school of St. Thomas Hospital in London. During his first years as a practitioner, he wrote his first novel, Lies of Lambeth. After his success, he decided to abandon his career as a doctor and decide to become a full-time writer. This lengthy opening on the writer's biography is key to understand the protagonists of Human Bondage. The two are mirror-like images. We can see how many aspects of the author's life were taken, analysed and inserted in the novel. The protagonist, Philip Carey, loses his parents as a child and is sent to live with his uncle's family, who treats Philip coldly and prudishly. The author's stammer is substituted by a clubfoot. He too is sent to a college to study, but will then decide to continue his studies abroad in Germany to study literature and philosophy. He evades his uncle's desire for him to become a vicar and then an accountant by going to Paris, living a life like a bohemian and fully immersed in studying and producing art. In Paris, Philip will realize that what we desire is not always what is meant for us, and the realization comes when he understands that he's not as great of an artist as he thought he was. Back in England, he enrolls in medical school and meets Mildred, a vulgar and silly waitress, with whom he desperately falls in love with. Mildred will become the cause that keeps him from his own freedom of deciding and choosing what is best for him, of escaping and of living a satisfying life. Mildred will keep him from his goals, his friends, and a financial stability. He will become a succubus for her, a slave indeed, who is unable to let himself free from the chains that link him to such an insensitive and superficial person. It is only at the end of the novel that Philip will understand that his freedom did not revolve around seeing and traveling around the world, not having a place to call home. Instead, what he has always wanted was to have something that he's never had, a home and a family made of simple and truthful affections. William Somerset Maugham uses a cynical, unadorned, and realistic way of portraying his stories, and he caught the attention of Hollywood. The cinematic transposition of Human Bondage dates to 1934. The film was directed by John Cromwell, starring Leslie Howard in the role of Philip Carey and Bette Davis as Mildred. The film opens to a scene set in Paris, where Philip is having a discussion with his art professor, who tells him to face reality and accept the fact that he's not a great artist. After this revelation, he decides to go back to England to start medical school. During the medical school years, while being his friend's wingman, he encounters Mildred, and since that meeting, he will enter a spiral of toxicity and dynamics of submission that will lead Philip to desperation and torment. The film captures Maugham's cold and seemingly detached writing style. The audience will observe the two protagonists moving in between fixed sets. Their bodies will never be entangled in passionate embraces, and the perspective will show a sitting Philip and Mildred standing up, proving a position of superiority, while mocking and taking advantage of him. The occasion in which we will witness a change in perspective are very rare. It will be very unlikely to see Mildred being sat and subjected to Philip's authority. A fundamental scene is by the end of the movie, in which Mildred sick and close to death, will be checked by a practitioner Philip and waits for him to tell her how to save herself, this time without his help. The movie shows many aspects of the Mildred character that are less prominent in the novel. We see her suffering and selling herself out to many unrequited loves. She's being played by other men and consequently enters this vicious cycle of passion and disdain, the same cycle she bound Philip to. Mildred is a disillusioned young girl who has accepted the social condition in which for a woman to be free, she must find a husband, and such husband must be wealthy. Failing to do so will bind her to a dead-end job and to the societal stigma of being unmarried, and she will be forced to endure the abuse and molestation of the men lurking in the restaurants where she works. Mildred is cynical because how life treated her, and she directs her frustration and her desire for revenge towards Philip, a man who did not love much about her, only the idea of her. Contrary to Philip, Mildred lacked a desire of making things right for herself that could have cured her from the wickedness she had to endure by accepting the love of a man who presumably loved her sincerely. Yet the film, as well as the novel, shows us how Mildred would have never fallen in love with Philip, since she firmly believed in the idea that one either loves or is loved. On the other hand, Philip would have stopped loving Mildred at one point, since he was not sure what freedom meant for him. Both characters followed their nature, which brought them to bind inextricably in a game of toxicity and wickedness. The film is quite faithful to the spirit and the main plot of the novel, and it perfectly depicts this toxic relationship. It also shows, through glimpses, as in the novel, Mildred's sad ending. All minor characters like Nora, Philip's lover at one point of the story, and these university peers played the exact same role they played in the novel. They start the engine of the various situations that start and conclude the novel. The main differences between the film and the novel are caused by the obvious limitations of the medium. It could not have been easily put into film, such as Philip's childhood, adolescence, and German years. All that is shown is that Philip had once lived in France as an artist. Even the fact that he was an orphan is only a mention in the film, and his uncle exists only because we see his name on letters and checks. Of Human Bondage is a perfect representation of the evolving human spirit, unaware of the differences between what it really wants and it just desires. The protagonist moved like the plot of his life was already written, in this thing called life. He tries to find his path and personal freedom by going far and beyond. He then realizes that what freedom comes from is within. It should not be influenced by external causes. Mildred, so wicked and evil, struggles to find her own path and relies on the help of easy lovers and wicked men that only play with her, and by that feeding that monster that lives inside of her, which in the end will lead to her ruin.